Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. Delighted to have the chance to introduce the topic and host this webinar on AP automation that lets you focus on work and not fraud detection. Just as everyone starts to join, I'm just going to do a quick introduction to the host, myself, and the speakers on the call today. And then we will get into the demonstration. So my name is Matthew Sewell. I'm the marketing manager here at Landell Services, and I support the team with sessions such as this and helping customers kind of experience Landell and understand the value that we offer. Today I've got joining me James Chartner from Rico. He's the business development manager, and he's going to be running through the demonstration today on accounts payable automation for DocuWare. And I've got joining me one of my colleagues, Matt Brannigan, who is our IT account manager and has over a decade of experience in IT and cybersecurity. And he's going to be running through a very short section on cybercrime, fraud, specifically around invoices. So we'll get into that shortly. A little bit of housekeeping. There's me doing a little bit of housekeeping at home. This session is being recorded. Speakers' contact information can be provided at the end of this upon request. Please do ask any questions throughout the webinar, and at the end of this presentation and demonstration, we will get round to those questions. We will be sharing an invoice fraud checklist after this event, and there's an opportunity to have a bit of a review around the maturity of your accounts payable process and a little bit around security and what you're doing to prevent it. So a little bit about who Landell are. I'll be very quick on this. I know we want to get to the demonstration just to give everyone a chance to kind of join. So Landell are an IT managed service provider, and we ultimately help IT businesses manage their technology so they can focus on doing what they need to do. Our mission is to inspire growth for our customers by deploying smart technology solutions, and we have access to industry-leading technology such as DocuWare. We don't come with a bias. We take a very consultative-led approach, and we find the right solution for your business. We're reliable best practice. We take reliable and best practice approach, so we align with ITIL and ISO. And we're experienced print security and IT technicians internally. So I'm just going to kick over to my colleague, Matt Brannigan, who is going to take over from here. Matt, thanks very much for joining us.
Very much. Thanks everybody for joining. When we were running through this, we just wanted to get a bit of an idea of what the real threat landscape is looking like at the moment, especially when it comes through to invoice fraud and some of the elements that are coming through. So we've just pulled up some stats over here just to really run through a high-level view of what some of the vulnerabilities in the market are looking like at the moment. So if we just have a look at some of the, Matt, if you can just bring some of those up. So 40% of the most recent fraud was cyber facilitated. So this comes through phishing attacks, malicious PDFs, which we'll get through to shortly. So you can see there's a large volume that's actually coming through that is coming through from the cybersecurity space. 31% of those victims fell victim to invoice fraud. So there's quite a large hit rate in terms of when those actions come through, them taking effect. And then only 19% were actually blocked by the banks. So there's a lot of impact when this invoice fraud is coming about. It's really hitting businesses hard, and there's not a lot of checks and balances that can be done at the end of the event to make sure that you really are being protected there. So if we have a look at the average value of these attacks that are coming up here, so £4,890. Now that's happening per attack, so per invoice that's coming through. So, and I'm sure that many of you recognize that there's not just one invoice that's coming through at the end of the month. So this really is an area where it's no longer just an IT problem. This is becoming a business risk. This is an area where we really need to tighten up, make sure that everything is exactly where we need to be, eliminating as much gray spaces as possible to ensure that the wallet isn't getting hit at the end of the day. Now, going to run through a few ways that these attacks are happening, that they are taking place in environments, and then we'll run through some of the pieces that can be done by businesses to ensure that not a lot really hits them at the end of the day. So vulnerability exploitation has changed quite dramatically in the last couple of years. So before, where you had targeted attacks happening in businesses, it's now become more opportunistic. No longer do you need this individual skills to be able to go into an environment and make sure that you can force the breach or that you can pull the data. As you can see by the image on the right over there, these are vulnerabilities for sale. So effectively, it's breach in a pack. You pay a certain amount of money on the dark web, somebody gives you a breach pack that can go into an environment, and you basically just execute that exploit. This can be done in a number of ways. We'll run through a few different areas in terms of how they can get in that are a little bit more pertinent to the discussion at hand. So cybercrime as a service is growing massively. So it is as easy as getting a Microsoft license. You can go online, you put in a couple of bank details, you put in the areas that you want to attack, you get the exploits. They'll even run it for you. It's cybercrime as a service. It's become an industry of its own. All right. So what this does is it effectively creates a more difficult environment to manage. As you can see there on the last line, threat actors are no longer breaking in, they're logging in. So one of the ways that they do this is still through phishing. The biggest weak point in any business is still the people layer, unfortunately. But there's a few things that these technologies are putting in place here to make sure that that's getting managed, that that's being a little bit more wrapped up and closed off. So one of the big newcomers into these breach packs are malicious PDFs. So effectively, these are disguised malware within the PDF itself. Now, this is getting into even higher levels where the hexadecimal representation looks perfect. Everything looks great. But once that invoice gets opened up, you're still going to get hit with info stealers that are effectively going to scrape the environment for any login details. This is going to give them access into an environment. So these are really things that there's a few checks that can be done to make sure that we are limiting the amount of risk here. But one of the things with cybersecurity is there's no such thing as 100% secure. There's small incremental pieces that you can do to make sure that you are as secure as you can possibly be. But unfortunately, it's no longer a discussion about if you're going to be breached, it's when. So one of the biggest risks that comes through from this is unmanaged accounts, untrained staff with access to these areas, and those are really creating massive vulnerabilities in a business. One thing, the first and best thing that you can do is have staff that recognize what a fraudulent invoice looks like, and that's becoming more and more difficult nowadays. So they really need to understand what the entire supply chain looks like. So understanding what these risks look like are really going to get you into a much better security posture than anything else. So one of the pieces that we will always recommend when it comes through to this is conditional access. So conditional access is an area where only certain people are allowed access into certain SaaS environments, certain applications, or even into certain file storage systems. I'm going to run you through a bit of a process of what this looks like when somebody lands. So the social engineering and the malicious file attachments, that's really coming through from those dark web breach packs that people are getting nowadays. You can get a PDF that's already got all of this information in there. Phishing campaigns are absolutely rampant and they're growing exponentially. What used to take 16 hours to build in terms of a good phishing campaign can now be done by malicious AI in 5 minutes. So it's getting better, it's getting faster. These are areas that threat actors are going to be investing in. So the first thing that will really happen is these malicious campaigns will go out. A PDF comes into an environment, somebody who hasn't received the correct amount of training or isn't in the right supply chain, in the right chain, opens that up, and they suddenly, info stealers have gone into the environment and they're now looking for credentials. Once those credentials are in hand, these guys have the tools that we do nowadays as well. So what they do is they deploy a vulnerability scanner. They look at the entire environment and look for all of the weak processes that are coming up in the business. Those are the areas that they're going to be looking to exploit. But they're effectively getting an entire map of a business to make sure that they know where the weakest points are that they can go and exploit, whether that be with malicious software that goes in, malicious malware, or even if it's identifying individuals within the business where PDFs can go in to get approved. So if there's layers that are getting skipped, if there are approval layers that potentially are a little bit weak, all of these become vulnerabilities to a business that they can really take advantage of. So part of the solution that comes through from this is 3 pillars to cybersecurity, and those are people, process, and technology. Now, unfortunately, people are the weakest of this, but it's also the easiest to address, right? Awareness and accountability for all of these processes, training and conditional access, those two make such an enormous difference beyond what technology can do. The process becomes part of, or becomes an effect of that training and conditional access, making sure that the right people are receiving the right information, that they have access to those correct environments, and that it's closed off to everybody else. It is hyper important nowadays, right? And then the training to be able to recognize those threats and vulnerabilities when they're actually coming through, and then building in those risk-orientated controls. Effectively, the question that needs to be asked in cybersecurity nowadays is how much risk are you willing to ingest, and where are you willing to ingest it from? Okay. We don't think that this should be an area that should be risked at the moment. So these are the pieces that we really think that should be put in place. The process becomes the next step of all of this, right? So limiting the amount of risk that you've got by having firm processes in place. This is where solutions like DocuWare really come into the forefront. If you can reduce any of the gray space in terms of where the approval process needs to go and what the next steps need to be, those are all areas that we can have a look at. Okay, then that process builds on to multi-step approvals. So if you're a threat actor going into an environment and you see that there's only one approval layer that needs to be made, there's an inbox that you can then go and attack. If you get into that inbox, you can effectively approve. So we also need to make sure that there's audit trails just for the compliance piece. So if there is a breach that comes through and those approval processes are checked, how do we know that they were checked? How do we know at what time they were checked? And how do we know who got access into those environments as well? All right. And then finally, we get onto the technology piece. Now, this is really the supporting structure that allows for the rest of these other two pillars to be built upon. But it's as important as the rest of it, right? So process-driven applications. This is hugely important. Again, limiting that gray space makes an enormous difference to any type of vulnerability assessment that can be done. Having good SSO, MFA, and conditional access pieces in there, information and access management are huge nowadays. Okay, so we need to understand what the identity is, and we need to understand what the access management protocols actually look like. So having any type of conditional access onto those SaaS environments plays a massive part and cuts risk enormously. And then having secure backups when things do go wrong. Because like I said, it's not about if, it's when nowadays. So making sure that all of this gets wrapped up in a full cybersecurity protocol. All of these tools complement an entire security stack. So once you've got all of these layers in place, it's really about defending and being proactive against any threats that could be coming into an environment. But it's also important that these are all linked up into your remediation processes, your backup processes, your log identification to be able to know what's happening in your environment. So it's not just about prevention, it's also about making sure that you're ready for when things do go wrong and that you can restore the environment to a safe place. So a lot of this is about where these invoices are going, how they're being managed, and then how to remediate if things do go wrong. Guys, from my side, thank you very much for listening to this. This is a tool that we really do back. Eliminating those processes makes a massive difference. So I hope that you enjoy the rest of the demo.
Thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. Every time I talk to you, there's something new that you seem to come with that does seem to shock me. So especially the dark web side of things. So thanks very much for going through that. Right now, over to the definitely last but not least, the man, the myth, the legend, James Chandler. James today is going to be going through DocuWare's award-winning solution on how to automate accounts payable processes. He's going to demonstrate how easy DocuWare is to adopt within your organization and show and discuss some real-world case studies, some organizations, some examples of how this product has been implemented, along with expanding the scope beyond AP. And as Matt just went through, kind of showing how DocuWare can also be a guard dog for your environment and help support with the security side of things for your accounts payable team. James, thank you very much for joining us today again. Over to you.
Brilliant. So yes, thank you. And thanks, Matt. It's a really good eye opener. I think everyone needs a good cold sweat of a morning with the kind of information that you provide. But I'm pleased to say that actually what DocuWare can do can help tick a lot of those boxes and reduce that risk out there, especially when it comes to document processing, and probably more importantly, the information that resides in those documents as well. So I'm going to run through this morning DocuWare. So it is an electronic document management system that will allow an organization to centrally, securely store their documents. Not only that, actually look at the information within those documents, follow processes, validations, and all the checks and balances that might be required by a business. How does DocuWare do that? DocuWare has a really rich feature set that enables organizations to really maximize processes and documents and efficiency. So first of all, we can actually extract data out of documents automatically in a structured format, which means then we can start to allow processes to begin. So we can maximize efficiencies and make sure automated processes are taken based on the information we're extracting. I've mentioned already, we have document management again, so this can be user-based level access rights with the multi-factor authentication that's been mentioned, so crucial these days in ensuring security at every level accessing this information. We can share with those people that have the authority and the access rights, so we can work together on documents in a seamless way, centralized, web-based process. We can gain insights of what's happening with documents in our organization. We get visibility of if something is following a process, where is it in that process? Who is it with? What actions have been taken? So we can get instant, we're not phoning, messaging, shouting across the office to find out what's happening. Within one click, we can get access to that information. Yeah, as we mentioned, there's a bit of a theme today. All the security compliance is taken care of. So we've got all of the security levels taken care of. We have all the backups in place as well in multiple locations. So all of that, again, if something happens and we need to revert back, we can do so quickly and easily. And not only that is we can work with other systems. So we can integrate with other platforms. So not only are we actually managing the documents and the processes and the data, we can validate information against other sources to make sure what we are processing is correct, and also update those systems to make sure that we are managing with a single version of the truth. So when it comes into accounts payable, we tend to look at probably the most common challenges around accounts payable. They're probably not unfamiliar to those people that are on the call this morning, but typically we are looking at people in an AP department with lots of manual data entry. Maybe there's errors because of the volumes that are being processed. Duplicate payments is becoming more common practice, more commonplace, I should say. This is where typically a typical supplier maybe sends it to the right place, but they're a bit impatient, or they'll send it to 5 other people just in case. Suddenly that means the same invoice is landed into 5 different points in the business, and it increases the risk of that being processed more than once. And then again, if you're lucky enough to identify that and spot it, you're still going to spend that time and that administration in ensuring that where the credit's raised from the supplier and all of that clerical maintenance. Approval processes and coordination. Who does this go to? It's above a value. It's sat on somebody's desk. They're not in the office. I need it signed off now. People are out and about. People are at home. All of those things are making things more challenging when it comes to getting documents processed. And with those kind of challenges, it also then increases the risk around security. Is somebody checking this on a WhatsApp? Is somebody just text messaging somebody? Is somebody emailing this? There's lots of different ways people communicate, some controlled, but some uncontrolled. And again, that opens up risks in terms of the wrong people getting views on documents that they maybe necessarily don't have. And again, when it comes to an auditor, are they really going to be happy that somebody's sending a text message to say it's okay to pay an invoice? Or not even finding a document at all because it's residing in somebody's mailbox who maybe is on holiday or not even potentially in the business anymore. All of those kind of challenges come into play at any point in time. So we've gone through a lot of things. We've broken out into a cold sweat on the security and the risks that are there. We've looked at some of the challenges that we typically see on a day-to-day basis. But what I'm pleased to do is now we're going to go into the section of helping you through these challenges. So with DocuWare, we can make it as simple and as easy and as secure and as compliant as possible. First of all, when it comes to that manual data entry, what about if we can use AI-powered data extraction to extract the information that we want out of documents to save people having to key information out and saving that time and reducing potentially the error rate of keying information out. So we can save a lot of time. We can look up to 95% of time just from data entry. What about then checking those invoices, checking the data, so we can actually make sure we're not processing the same invoice twice? We can also go, and I'm going to be going into this in a demonstration, we can also start validating the supplier, not only from a supplier name level, but if we've got bank account details on an invoice, we can start checking the bank account details match on that. Again, reducing that risk of somebody trying to make a fraudulent claim via an invoice, which could potentially bypass a lot of those security layers because it maybe looks like it's come from a legitimate source. It's got no malicious code inside. All it's got is the wrong bank account details and the number that they need to pay to. We can help overcome and identify those types of challenges. Then once it's through, we've processed, we've captured the information, we can then put this through an automated approval process. What this means is we can validate again more information such as purchase order information, maybe delivery note information, make sure all of that matches so that is all correct and in place. We can route it to the right person within the organization or persons if we have multi-level approvals. We can make sure it goes to the right people securely. They can view the information, the documents securely, and approve those documents securely, complete with audit trails in place as well. Again, once we've got all of that processing, we're not having to go to an ERP or a finance system to then manually key that information out. We can take our clean, accurate data and process this and push this into those finance packages to ensure that the booking is taking place, it's booked in, it's approved, ready for the payment run. Finding the information, whether it is during a process or after the process, when we have that lovely time of year when an auditor maybe popped their head around the corner, we can find information and documents quickly and easily. Everything is searchable, everything is fully compliant, and everything has an audit trail and a document history. So again, finding information, we can use keywords, or we could actually segment this down into suppliers and date ranges and amounts. Whatever we need to do, we can find those documents. And I've just mentioned there, yeah, we can hopefully make your life easier if we have audits or month-end reviews. All the information is there at the touch of your fingertips for you available to review and process. So on my screen right now is our DocuWare user interface. You'll notice it is web-based. So all we need to access DocuWare is an internet connection and a web browser. We also have apps for iOS and Android, so we can access this if necessary on our smartphones and tablets if we're out on the go, out of the office. So it makes it nice and easy to be able to access these documents, but still retain the security. We can have our users actually do our multi-factor authentication the same way lots of people probably do these days with their Microsoft accounts. So again, we can integrate this as part of that authentication to make sure it's secure. What I have on the left-hand side of my screen right now is our user interface, and we've got some options that we're going to go through during the demonstration. And the first one I have open right now is a document tray. So this is where documents can land into our system, and we can capture documents in a variety of different ways. We can monitor an email mailbox and bring those emails and attachments in. So for example, invoices at landall.co.uk would be a prime example where we can monitor that mailbox, bring those invoices in. We can take pictures with our mobile, we can upload them. We can drag and drop, we can scan, we can print, we can watch folders on the network. We can do lots of things to capture documents and information into our system. And once they're here in our document tray, we'll notice some color coding. Now, I've got maybe 3 red, 1 amber, and 1 green document on my screen here. And this is where we start using our data extraction called intelligent indexing. This is where our system learns the layout of your documents, and in this example, invoices, and starts automatically extracting the information. Now, the color coding, the traffic light system, is the system telling us how confident it is it's found all of that information. Now, in this example, we've got 3 red, 1 amber, 1 green. So the red invoices is maybe somebody, and you'll probably notice by the naming convention I've got for my demo, but the red invoices are something maybe it's not seen so many times. So as it sees more of these invoices, the more confident it becomes and it moves to amber. And we're only talking 1 or 2 invoices from the same supplier. 1 or 2 invoices later, it would be green, telling us I'm happy I've found all the information I need to extract out of this invoice. When it comes to searching, we've mentioned we can search based on lots of information that we maybe extract out of the invoice. But just as easily, we could just search any keyword in there. Every document we store goes through full optical character recognition. Now, in my first example, I am just going to very quickly set the scene. I have a purchase order. I've raised a purchase order for our supplier, US Steel. I've placed the order, and as part of my purchase order process, I've listed out the line items, and I've maybe actually put them against a cost center or a project code at that point as well. So we've received the goods and we've received an invoice. I'm going to store that invoice. And we can see using intelligent indexing, it's extracted all that information. And it's also gone down to line item level where we've just got a quantity and net amount. Now my GL codes, tax codes, those types of things, I'm going to leave empty right now. Because what's going to happen when I store my invoice, this is going to be its first level of validation. It's going to go and check everything that we've got in this invoice matches against our supplier list and our purchase order. Once it has done those things and cleared those checks, it's going to raise a task for the person who maybe perhaps raised the purchase order to then approve that invoice. So straight away, I'm the person who raised that purchase order. Rather than obviously in a real environment, this probably go to different people, but rather than logging in and out, will stay the same. But in this example, we can see now a task has come through straight away to approve invoice. In a live environment, we often will have maybe an email notification to that user as well to say they have an invoice to approve, but we won't be attaching a document to that email. Instead, we will have a link which will securely take them to their own task page, again, retaining the security and control of the document. So we can see now here is our invoice. I've got some options where I can approve, like a query or cancel the invoice. If I choose approve, we can even see it's now giving me a visual validation of actually, I've checked the line items here. I'm happy that these have all matched. And we can even see down to, we're checking the quantity, the PO quantities, the net amount, and we can see it's even coding each of those lines based on the information we have on the purchase order. So we can quickly and easily see all the information is correct and as it should be. And we're in a much better position to make an informed decision to approve this invoice at this stage. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to confirm that invoice is approved. And then if we just go back to that chart, if we remember, this could now be in a stage where we maybe export this to be booked into the finance system. So we've reduced that process of manually keying out, maybe manually checking against that information, maybe attaching copies of invoices to emails backwards and forwards. All of those things have been automated into basically 2 clicks, making it nice and easy, secure, and simple as possible. Now, that's the lovely world where everything works, everything matches, and nobody's out with any malicious intent. What about if we receive an invoice that looks just the same? And we're happy, look, it all looks good. Yeah, all the information looks, it's just like any other US Steel invoice we receive. The only key difference in mine is my account number and sort code maybe aren't necessarily the same as what we have for our supplier. In this instance, what could DocuWare do? So I'm going to go ahead and store that. Everything looked fine to me. I process and look at hundreds of invoices from lots of different suppliers. I haven't got time to be going, oh, let's just double check those account numbers just in case. DocuWare can do that for us. So in this example, a task is maybe flagged to the finance team or another team within the organization where it's flagged it to say we have bank detail mismatch. We can see our invoice, and we could actually have a couple of options in where we can release or cancel this. Now, as part of this, what we've also had the system doing is actually pointing this out to say this has to be reviewed. We've even got contact names for our supplier on record, so we can actually phone them and speak to a person to check, is this correct? So we're trying to give as much information so somebody can then make a proper decision around what is happening, why is this invoice coming, and why do those bank details not match. So we could release it and have to put a reason in for release. Again, all part of the audit trail, so we can see clearly who the person who's taken the action and it allowed this invoice to come through, perhaps not correct details on there. And again, we could also cancel it again and the reasons in and why we might want to have cancelled that. And that could just be a mismatch. And we could put fraud, if we can spell fraud, alert. And we can put those comments. And again, all of these comments can then be tracked and stored within our system so we can see what information is being captured at each stage of a process. Just a final example. We've gone from one extreme to another, but what happens if maybe we receive an invoice, but there's been a price change on one of our line items that we've ordered? So when it comes to invoicing, there's something different. This is going to do two things. The first thing, which I always fail to mention, is it's going to tell me off because straight away you may have noticed I've been using the same invoice. The first invoice did not get past the duplicate stage because we flagged a more important issue, that there was something different on that invoice around bank details. The second one passed the bank details stage, but has now said, actually, we already have an invoice like this in here. So in this example, we can say, what's the reason for the duplicates? We can maybe cancel it or release it. And we have to put a release. And I'm just going to put demo into here for us for our reason. It could be yet something was done in error and they just adjusted the same invoice. I personally would ordinarily hope that they would issue a new invoice and cancel the previous, but it doesn't always happen. But in this example, we're just going to release that duplicate invoice because then that can go through the same approval process. And when that comes through to the task, it's going to flag any mismatches on those lines as well. Give it a quick refresh. So we've got it working hard this morning on processing documents. So there we go. We've got an invoice approved, but we'll notice straight away line 4 has a mismatch. Why is it mismatching? Let me just make my screen a little bit bigger and a bit easier to see. There we go. So line 3 mismatch. We've got a 2-meter rail. We've got the right quantity, but it's double the amount that was on our purchase order. So straight away we can nail down and narrow down what is wrong with this invoice. It's flagged it, what line item it was on there as well. So again, we could take action on what necessary action with the supplier on there, approve it, query it, cancel it down, whatever actions that might be. And I should say, everything I've shown you is entirely customizable. Every process, every bit of data that we're capturing can be completely tailored to your organization. That's all great. We've got lots of information we're processing. How do we manage some of that information as well? How do we maybe, if we don't have a purchase order process in place, but it'd be something really useful, how do we make sure that the supply details we have on record are always up to date? Well, a really useful way of doing that within DocuWare is using what we call forms. So we've got the ability to create and publish online web forms. And we've got two examples that are really relevant to today's demonstration that I'm going to show today. First of all is we could raise a purchase order. We could create a purchase order form within DocuWare if we don't already have one, where it can create purchase order numbers for us automatically. It can prompt us for information. So we could say we're going to order this for project work. And in this example, we can make the form adjust or change based on the decisions we make. So if I was to say this is a purchase order for project work, I have to then actually put the correct project code against it as well. So we can then see the information relevant to this purchase order. So we've got all of that information, whether it's for accounting or whether it is actually for project management reasons, we can capture all of that information and we can start putting items in there and we can start to see it calculating the correct amounts. And we can even put this through an approval process if necessary as well. On a supplier level, and we're seeing this more and more because we know this can be often a headache for a finance team, is we can create and publish a supplier details form, and we can make this a public facing form for your suppliers to complete. So in which case we can put the information of a company in there. So we could put the address in there and all of that information. We can put our bank account details in there. So we could, I'm just trying to think of a bank account off the top of my head. And we can put the relevant information into that form as well. Another really useful kind of extra feature, if I'd say, in this process is also being able to apply what kind of goods does the supplier provide? Because perhaps we don't always know what they provide. But if we mark it here that we're a provider of all of these things, we can have users actually search this record and say, show me any suppliers that can provide IT services or office supplies. And straight away, it will list those suppliers you already have approved and on file that can provide that service or those goods for you. And finally, we can attach documents to forms in which we want a copy of the supplier contract on record. We could store it against our supplier details. We can make a note of the payment terms and apply those as the invoice process. So as an invoice form landlord comes in, we know our payment terms are 60 days. So we're going to set a deadline in our system for 60 days from this point forward. So we can really capture all of this information quickly and easily, centralize it and apply it against processes and rules. We can also have this done regularly, automatically. So we have a lot of customers now that are using forms similar to this, but every 12 months, DocuWare will automatically contact the person within each of those companies, asking them to make sure that their details are up to date, update information. They come into the organization for a review. They can highlight any changes that have been made and make sure that all of their information is as up to date as possible, rather than having to maybe email each of your suppliers, phone each of your suppliers, chase them up. DocuWare could manage that entire process also. The final thing I'm going to show you today on the demonstration is, and I've mentioned it a couple of times, is finding information. Finding information can be sometimes absolute pain, depending on if you know the folder structure, has somebody named it right, is it in a piece of paper, is it an email? Within DocuWare, everything is centralized and we can search based on any of the information that we've extracted. We could search based on any of the information we've extracted. So we could say, show me all invoices for US steel between a date range above a certain amount, and we could easily filter that search criteria down. We can go as simple as, show me anything, any invoices for 2-meter steel girders. Because I know using this invoice once or twice, I can hit search. It's going to find me those 3 invoices we've gone through today. We can double click and we can see where it's finding that information. Let me just adjust my screen. It highlights where it's finding that information in each of those documents. Now, while I've got this document open, we'll see any tasks or any actions that have been taken in forms of a stamp. So we can see a stamp has been placed on the, based on my decision, where we've said we've got mismatching bank details on this and we've got a fraud alert. We'd also see actually the status of this invoice has been cancelled due to the mismatching account details. So again, we could even search based on any of that information. We can see an approved, and we can see one still in the process of being approved. So again, when we mentioned around that real-time visibility, all of that is available to see. And from an auditing point of view, let's go into the approved one. And we can see when the invoice comes in, who's approved it, when they've approved it, and anytime anybody has ever viewed a document in the system as well is also tracked within here as well. Just to kind of recap what we've just gone through, I've actually shown the processing of 3 invoices there with manual data entry not necessary. We've checked for duplicate payments. We've saved all of that time. We've gone through all of the process. So we've gone through the approval process quickly and easily. And we've also made sure everything was done securely. We've not shared any documents left and right with emails or attachments. We've checked against fraud. We've made sure that our supply details are correct. All of those things have been taken care of in a matter of minutes. And in some cases, probably seconds. Maybe the first one when we approved it was I think 2 clicks were involved. So it really makes the whole process simple and easy, but more importantly, it's making sure it is secure and reduces the risk involved with any of your document processing. This is around accounts payable today. But DocuWare, as I may have mentioned right at the beginning, is a platform. This can help not just around invoice processing, but any other types of documents and document processing. So we talked around accounts. You maybe have a lot of challenges with manual process when it comes to sales. We have customers that do a very similar process with accounts payable. They'll do it with sales orders, so they can check the sales orders, automatically extract the information, validate it against their booking system. We can do a lot around onboarding of new recruits and HR and the maintenance and the security that is involved around managing documents with people, as well as lots of others around purchasing and maybe paperwork around logistics. All of those areas can be taken care of in the same platform. So it is a really powerful tool, not just for AP, but for the whole entire business. And that is why worldwide, there are so many customers using DocuWare today. DocuWare, I should say right at the beginning, it's been around since the mid-80s. It is a mature product. It is a market-leading product, and very powerful tools are always being developed, whether that is looking at ways we can encompass more and more AI, but also making sure that this stays secure as possible and looking at all the latest legislation, not just UK-wide, but worldwide as well, which is the reason why there are a lot of awards out there, a lot of recognition for the product, not just within the UK. We do have UK awards on there, but there are also European, US, and other areas of the world as well when it comes to getting those awards and accolades for DocuWare. So that concludes my section. Thank you very much for your attention today. And hopefully we'll speak to you soon on how we can help you with DocuWare in your organization. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Appreciate that. And on time as well. Spot on. Well done. Never know how to, never quite sure if it will play out in time, but well done. Thank you everyone so far for listening. Just want to go to the next items. So this is just kind of a throwback, and I think, Matt, you wanted to kind of just have a quick conversation and review on these solution items and how it pertains to DocuWare's product. But yeah, a bit of an open dialogue and discussion here quickly.
Perfect. I mean, as James just took us through the entire process there, I mean, it's really hitting on all three of these pillars. You know, the people aspect there of actually running these technologies, having that process firmed up by technology like this to ensure that those gray spaces are really eliminated. And, you know, the technology being the backbone of all of that, having those centralized areas, having those checks that are automatically in place. You know, wherever risk can be limited, we should be taking those opportunities.
Absolutely.
Like I said earlier, this isn't an IT problem, it's a business risk issue. So having all of these three elements in place, you know, DocuWare and your security awareness training and all of those elements are building into firming up that security posture.
So if you would like to, I guess, have a session with one of the guys on the call and I guess investigate a little bit further your accounts payable process, then please scan the QR code and book a personalized review. It's completely free and confidential, and we will give you insight into, I guess, how you can advance or improve your accounts payable process, and perhaps a little bit of a discussion around security and what you're doing to firm up and make your accounts payable processes more secure, as Matt discussed. Just moving over onto the Q&A now, and we've got a few questions that we're going to go through. Again, if you have any questions you would like to ask any of the panelists, then please do drop them in the Q&A section now. But let's jump into it. So first question for you, James. So our suppliers and POs are stored in our finance system. Would this work with DocuWare?
Yes. So sorry. Yes, I kind of should have mentioned that during the demonstration, but it's really important to understand that my demonstration, all of the information was contained within DocuWare. But with our integration capabilities, it doesn't have to be. We can validate information from a variety of different packages. There's hundreds of different applications we can integrate with, and we can validate purchase order information, supplier information, or any other data for that matter that we might need to check as part of a process, or even update back to as well.
Thank you. One for you, Matt. What happens if there is a breach?
So when a breach happens, yeah. Effectively, that's when the full security stack, that people, process, and technology part all needs to kind of work together. As we said earlier, these are wonderful preventative steps. You know, making sure that you've got that conditional access, making sure that you've got the limiting factors on all of that risk that can go into an environment. Sure, when a breach does occur, you need the rest of your security environment to really pop up and do its part. Your backups need to kick in. Your remediation processes need to go on the alert. They need to go and do some threat hunting. You'll be pulling logs from the entire environment to be able to understand where the threat came from, how it actually got in, and how you can go and do a root cause threat hunt. So effectively, it's all part of a larger ecosystem, and this is a very big part of it. The prevention part is big. But the rest of the ecosystem is going to kick in there for you as well. So remediation processes are really important. It's about layering all of that technology and making sure that you are as secure as you possibly can. Having a single tool in your arsenal will help with that single area, but the threat is a lot larger than that today. So if that is a concern for you and that is something that is new to you as well, this should be a conversation that you're having with the service providers. If it's not, you know, give us a shout. We'll be more than happy run through that, do a bit of an audit, and find out where you are.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks for that answer, Matt. And final question I've got on here for today, unless anyone else is going to drop something in the Q&A, and this will be for you, James. You mentioned other departments. Would I need a system for each department?
Yes. So no, absolutely not. The beauty with DocuWare is your investment is with the platform. So all the functions and features we've covered today can be absolutely tailored to any other department. So yeah, so it would be the same system, the same platform. You wouldn't have to buy one for each department. It would just then be managed on who can access what sections or what configurations within the system. So if you imagine in the background of DocuWare, we have what we essentially have file cabinets. We might have one for accounts, one for HR, one for sales, and we can manage access controls right down to document level on who can access what in what file cabinets and who's involved in what process. But the beauty of that is it's all one system, it's all one platform, to be able to manage moving forward for all of those different departments.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. So that wraps up our Q&A for today. Thank you guys for attending, and thank you very much for doing each your own sections. Very informative. For anyone, as said earlier, that would like to, I guess, get a better understanding of your accounts payable process, how it can be more secure, how it can be more efficient, we will be sending out an email after this with a recording of the webinar. And if you'd like to engage with us and you'd like to investigate further and take advantage of James, Matt's time, then please do reach out to us. We look forward to speaking with you. Thanks, guys, for doing this today, and we'll catch up soon, I'm sure.